And one more important aspect in this topic is international reaction on all these events, and all civilized world is deeply concerned with Russian aggression and annexation of Crimea, as they state, but practical resolution of this problem connected only with sanctions provided by against Russian authority. And at the same time, Ukraine is trying to find the ways how to discuss the issue of Crimea. What is the international reaction around the annexation of Peninsula? Watching the following story.
Insolent annexation of Crimea by Russian Federation provoked a deep disturbance from the side of progressive states and international community in common. In several days after the illegal referendum that was organized in Crimea in order to confirm the desire of peninsular citizens to separate from Ukraine, Ukrainian Parliament Verkhovna Rada has adopted a declaration in which it encourages members of international community to abstain from the international recognition of so-called Republic of Crimea and annexation of Crimea by Russian Federation. Crimea was, is and will be Ukrainian territory. Ukrainian people never will stop fight for liberation of Crimea, no matter how long and hard it would be. In 1 week after the adoption of this declaration, UN General Assembly adopted the Territorial Integrity of Ukraine resolution in which it was underlined that referendum on Crimea and Sebastopol has no any legal force. 100 states supported the resolution, 58 abstained and 11 voted against. In particular, territorial integrity of Ukraine was not supported by Belarus, Bolivia, Venezuela, Armenia, Zimbabwe, Cuba, Nicaragua, North Korea, Russia, Syria and Sudan.
Many still struggle to grasp the reality. It happened in Ukraine, in the very heart of Europe. It happened in the 21st century.
We've always said that Russia had legitimate interests in Ukraine. It has been disheartening in the extreme to see Russia carry on as if Ukrainians have no legitimate interests in Crimea, when Crimea is a part of Ukraine.
Despite of the support of Ukraine by progressive states, the Russian Federation ambassador called that voting as a victory for Russian diplomacy. Also, annexation of Crimea was supported by a camp of unrecognized Abkhazia, North Ossetia and Nagorno Karabakh.
Even though this resolution which we opposed was adopted by the General Assembly, I think it's a moral victory for the Russian diplomacy, because an increasing number of countries is beginning to understand the complexity of the situation and the motives behind the actions of Crimea and the Russian Federation.
Representatives of Western states claim that sanctions against Russian Federation would be enhanced that provoke further economic and political isolation of Russia. Exactly, annexation of Crimea was the reason for excluding Russian Federation from G7 group. But despite of the international pressure on Russian Federation, Russian officials stay categorical concerning Crimean question. For Russia, Crimean question is closed forever. There is nothing to discuss. There are referendum in Crimea. We changed our constitution, and Crimea will stay a part of Russian Federation forever. Nevertheless, Ukraine is continuing to seek new ways for discussion the Ukrainian future of Crimea. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko announced the new format of Crimean liberation discussion, Geneva Plus, with participation of US, EU and possible states which signed the Budapest Memorandum. I'm assured that optimal format for international mechanism on returning of Crimea is Geneva Plus format, with participation of our European partners, USA and maybe states that took part in signing of Budapest Memorandum. For now, international community pays attention only to human rights violation in the occupied peninsula, and practical ways for the occupation of Crimea had not been developed yet.
Well, there is some feeling that international community is concentrated mostly on military conflict on the east of Ukraine because it's not finished yet. So Crimea is considered as a finished topic from the point of view of Russian Federation. So are some discussions on Crimean question are possible in theory, at least?
Okay, it's closed for Russian Federation. To a certain extent, it's not closed for European countries, for international community. But with the migration crisis in Europe, with the Syria crisis, it's not the headline topics. okay, there are violations of human rights in Crimea, but in comparison with the ongoing conflict in Syria and with the ongoing military action on the east of Ukraine, it's relatively calm, smooth, etc., etc. And let's focus on more important topics. For example, we have a crisis in Europe. That's why it's very important to constantly remind that there is a conflict, there is a problem with the human rights in Crimea, etc., etc. Moreover, with the migration conflict in Europe, there are voices that say we need to limit certain human rights, as limitation of freedom of speech, limitation freedom of assembly, limitation of that, limitation of those, and the world isn't the same as it was before the conflict, before the Budapest Memorandum was broken. It's really a huge issue, and those who do understand it understand that Crimea and Ukrainian situation in a whole, that's the front line of the conflict against European civilizational values and traditional civilizational values.
I asked about the possibility of discussion of Crimean question because on the eve, Petro Poroshenko talked about the new format for discussion.
Geneva Plus 4.
Geneva Plus format. Well, on your point of view, is it possible to attract Russian Federation to such kind of discussion? Or we should continue Minsk protests and then to add some new points about Crimea, about human rights? And
saying Geneva Plus 4, it's about the status of Crimea. As like a political scientist, I can say that you can have a lot of discussions and conversation and concerning with the Russian Federation, but for Russian Federation this point is closed, and you need to apply more pressure on Russian Federation so Russian Federation understands that the Crimea is not a closed question. And at the same time, there are people in Crimea, and a lot of them have refused Russian citizenship, and a lot of them were willing to refuse, but they have no opportunity because it was a very close period and with very limited places, and you need to really make an effort to renounce your new acquired citizenship. With such acquisition of citizenship, it had no precedent in the past because they became Russian citizens automatically despite their will. What concerns me as a human rights defender, that's the question of human rights in Crimea. And if we speak about occupation, deoccupation, appartenance of the Crimea to Ukraine or to Russian Federation, often we speak about territory and we forget about people. And I think for Ukraine it's very important to focus on the people, because if you start an action in Crimea to return Crimea back home to Ukraine, I can't give 100% that after military action people in Crimea will support Ukraine and they will be willing to return to Ukraine. It's more important to focus that Ukraine is still caring and still protecting, despite any obstacles, its citizens in Crimea. And what we can see right now, very controversial laws.
Yeah.